I'm going to open the meeting. It's 7:09. This is May 13th, where we are having a Falls Road Committee meeting. And we have a quorum. And I'd like to just get a motion to approve the minutes so we can get on with the BSC's work.
I'll make that.
Okay. Howard, and who can second that?
A second.
Okay, Deb, thank you. All right, so we have Kurt Porteria and Jeff Fasser, who will be presenting from the BSC, the second phase of work from their master plan work. This is I'd like it if we could let them present everything first, and then we'll have a minute, some time to ask questions. We're here to review the drawings that will inform the zoning and facilitate grant applications. And the goal here is to see what they have, and hopefully we'll be able to approve this as a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. So we can get on to the next phase of work, which is zoning and grant writing. So at that, I'd like to turn it over to you guys.
Okay,
We'll
thank
go from
you.
there.
Hopefully I'm going to click the right button here and share the presentation. There we go. Oh. Hopefully everybody can see that title slide.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great to be here and sharing all this information with you all. So what we're going to talk about tonight is just a brief recap of the project goals as well as the benefits it'll bring to the community. Then we're going to go through the master plan concept, quite a few slides and graphics regarding that to talk about the public right-of-way improvements. In other words, what can happen on town property, the potential of what could happen on the abutting property, some more detailed discussion about some of the roadway circulation improvements and kind of COD conduct coordination. And then most importantly, talk about, not most importantly, but very importantly, talk about funding programs that may be available to the town to help implement what can happen on the public land. And then kind of a prelude into zoning, which is going to be an important next step in this project. So first of all, just a quick reminder and also a refresher that we are building off of all the great work that's been done to date and building off the goals that had been developed for this area going back a couple of years now. Goals involving, the ability to have outdoor dining, which has been even more important to all of us this last year or so. Walkable browsing sidewalks and areas where people can interact with storefronts and shops. Those would require wider sidewalks, or in your case, sidewalks period, because you don't have sidewalks now along the corridor. Public green space, such as a town green or gathering space like that, as well as adding more residential along with the shops and retail walkable browsing uses along this corridor here. And in doing so, we're also looking at all the benefits this will bring to the community. Over and above just improving the Halls Road corridor itself. This whole package of improvements, being the public investment and zoning improvements, will do a number of things, such as allow for more square footage to be built on many, if not all, these parcels, which will result in the potential for increased revenue for the town. Zoning changes that we are going to be talking about will incentivize investment because, again, it'll allow property owners to have denser development or more square footage on their property and to upgrade their facilities in a way that works for them as investors in their property and also works for the community because it's a win-win for all. Allow housing units for older and younger residents, which our market analysis, as well as many of you know already, can be a challenge in Old Lyme. Some of the smaller units, there aren't as much available as the market would like to see. When we talk about a mix of uses on parcels, we in the land use world, we talk about that as being more sustainable land use. So for example, if a parcel now just has retail on it or just has office on it, but that parcel could be redeveloped and include retail and office and residential or any combination, it's a more sustainable land investment in the long term, because as markets go up and down in one particular area, they may remain stable or go up in another. And again, it's just a better investment for the property owner when they have a mix of uses on it. Certainly the ability for safer communication for both vehicles and pedestrians along this corridor. As we know now, pedestrians are underserved, but also it's more of a vehicular dominated corridor, and people, some unfortunately flying through its excessive speeds, and we need to balance the corridor's use for all. Also, presenting this in a way so that a property owner could see how they could transition from what they have on their property now into new buildings and new businesses, where some of their tenants may then move into these new buildings and properties, and then the older buildings could be torn down, provided that's what the owner wants and there's no longer a viable reuse for the older buildings. So it's we look at this as more of a logical, not just wouldn't this be nice, but let's make this attractive and appropriate for a property owner so they understand how they can transition from one to the other. And also just the overall setting the stage so that new development is consistent with the town character, the character of Old Lyme. So we've broken this presentation down into, first, what can the town do? This is a very wide town-owned corridor. We call it right-of-way, the corridor of land owned by the town. It's fairly wide, gets narrower in some areas, but still overall it's a fairly wide corridor, which offers a lot of opportunities for improvements that the town has control over, that the town can do along this corridor. And we're talking about things such as adding sidewalks with lighting. We're talking about getting into some of the details into some areas. I should have stated that as a master plan, it tends to be a kind of a 30,000 elevation view is a kind of a typical statement, but a big overall view. But we have focused into some of the details and the challenges along the corridor. So as I talk about some of the broader concepts, we are going to talk about some specific things to let you know we've taken them into consideration, because we pride ourselves in developing plans that can be implemented. So for example, the boardwalk over the culvert on the eastern end of Halls Road, close to Lyme, there is a narrow sidewalk there and it's over a culvert. We're going to show you some examples of how that could be addressed. A pedestrian bridge over Lieutenant River is another thing we're talking about, but also other improvements throughout the corridor for bicycle accommodation, open space enhancements. Again, we talked about it, maybe a town green, possibly introduction of a municipal building of some sort to bring a municipal presence into the area, crosswalks, and the plans to accommodate future on-street parking. So these are all things that can happen within the property owned by the town. So again, looking at the larger corridor, we're going to start at this end, which is the eastern end of Halls Road. Lime Street intersection is on the far right of this image. Then we go over the Lieutenant River and further up Halls Road there. So what we're showing here in beige is a improved sidewalk, bike accommodation type trail that could start at Lime Street, go along the roadway, and we'll get to some of the challenges there, and then swing inland so it could cross the Lieutenant River at the location where the former Bow Bridge used to be, and then continue down the alignment of Old Halls Road, and then connect up back with Halls, which I'll show you on the next slide. In this area here, you'll see on the left side of Lieutenant River, there is that kind of triangular green space that is publicly owned. A lot of cleanup has happened there recently, and it happens every year. And thanks to all of you who participate in that. I can really see you going in there and get your hands dirty and do a lot of cleanup. But it's an amenity for the town, and it would be great to have some more formalized trails through there. But we do need to be sensitive that it is a low area. It has the potential for flooding. It's a wet area, so those trails would need to be located appropriately. And so this is a suggestion of how trails could go through that area. And this is for walking. We're not talking about bike trails through this area. This is pedestrian access through the area. But the more solid yellow would be the pedestrian bicycle accommodation. Also, and this is where I get into the weeds, knowing we have to accommodate fire truck access along that old Halls Road to the Lieutenant River, because they do that as a point to draw water out of the river at times to fill their tankers as necessary. So all those things have been taken into consideration here. Getting into some of the details, as I talked about, we understand on the eastern edge, well, first of all, the upper image here is the Lieutenant River and where the old Bow Bridge used to be, and the potential of a new bridge going into that location. It could be a nice arched bridge, similar to a bow bridge, maybe not quite as steep as it had been in the past, because we need to be accommodating for all modes of people with mobility issues. This is a concept. We would, you'd have to work on this to get the proper bridge and approach to it and proper slopes and or anything, as well as flow underneath the bridge for any boats that might be going up or down the river, but more importantly, for any excessive water flow on the river. You don't want this to be an obstacle for high water coming through the area. And again, that's some of the weeds we get into, because those are the types of things we design. But again, this is more to give you an idea of what could happen there. And then the image on the lower left is what we're calling a boardwalk, because the current sidewalk along Halls Road there is just that small piece of asphalt between the guardrail. Sorry, thank you. The guardrail and the roadway is a very narrow sidewalk there, and it really is not pedestrian friendly. It's not inviting. And here we're talking, but however, the slope drops off on the back of the guardrail because it slopes down to the culvert, carries water underneath the roadway. So we're talking about a boardwalk type of treatment here, so that it would be wider and more inviting, and also could, along with the bridge, start to become a gateway element into the Halls Road area from the east. If we have a similar railing here as we have on the bridge, you're starting to kind of set up that theme of public enhancements of what those would look like along the roadway here. But most importantly, making it inviting and safe for pedestrians and bicyclists to come through the area. As we move further west along Halls Road, again, you can see on the right side of the slide here is the end of that triangular green space I just spoke about. And the right-of-way for the roadways narrows up a little bit as you travel more to the left of this image here to Huntley Road, which is that other large intersection on the left side. But again, because of the large right-of-way, there is a potential here for new green space, which we're showing in light green. Continuation of pedestrian access, which would be on what I'm going to call the upper side of that green space, so that the pedestrians are away from the roadway. But it's also the sidewalk there is in a location where, as new development occurs, and we're trying to encourage that development to occur to the front of the parcels, that new development would front on the sidewalks that are already there and invested in by the town. And you'll see how this all comes together in future slides. We've also placed the sidewalk here, even though this looks very conceptual. We actually did a deep dive and placed the sidewalk to avoid utility poles. Because if you want to invest in sidewalks sooner than later, you want to be able to build them efficiently, economically, and in a way that is not, you're not going to run into obstacles such as utility poles, which may not seem like a big deal, but if any of you have dealt with utility companies when it comes to public infrastructure projects, getting them to move a pole is not as simple as picking it up and moving it to the left or right. It becomes quite a process to get them to move a utility pole. So this particular sidewalk alignment here avoids utility poles, again, provides these areas for new green space. And also the sidewalks are located so that in the future, we come to a point where you might want to add on-street parking along Hulls Road. There's enough space between the new sidewalk and the Hulls Road drive lanes where parking can fit in. And we'll show you that in some future drawings also. The other thing I mentioned on what I'll call the old Hulls Road alignment that went down to Bowes Bridge, which is, again, the light buff color here for bikes and peds, that is wide enough to allow for fire trucks to get down there. And we've even showed a mountable curb kind of sweeping into that area from Hulls Road, so that this is where, again, we're getting into the weeds, but to show this is realistic. These improvements can be done and still allow for fire truck access to that area, which is obviously a major public safety necessity for the town, and we don't want to impede that in any way. Moving further along to the west, similar treatments here. Again, sidewalks along the roadway on both sides, avoiding utility poles, where possible, setbacks so that on-street parking can be added in the future. One point I wanted to make in this particular area here was there are a number of curb cuts along Hulls Road, and some of them need to remain. And we're showing crosswalks crossing those curb cuts, or we'll call them driveways, into private parcels. But some parcels, such as the antique shop, have very long curb cuts. Basically, it's just one big wide open space where vehicles can pull in and park in front of the building. And that is not pedestrian friendly. And as you move into wanting to add sidewalks, we just want to point out that you should start thinking about these curb cuts and where they occur and how wide they are. And you have the ability to tighten them up. One, for pedestrian comfort and safety, but two, it also becomes a safer driving environment, because the wider the curb cuts are and the more there's more interaction between people pulling in and out of driveways or parking areas and people driving along the street. And we want to minimize those points of potential conflict. So that's one of the points I wanted to illustrate in this particular view here. So now we're going to move into, after the town makes their investment, shows you're really proud of this corridor, and you have made zoning changes to encourage people to invest in their property along the corridor. We wanted to show you some of the potential of what could happen along the corridor when it comes to the public property, the private property, and what could happen by private landowners. So again, we're going to start on the east side here, starting at the Lieutenant River and moving up to Huntley, and start to show you some concepts, some options of what private landowners can do, provided the town sets the stage for this type of investment. And by setting the stage, I mean your investment in your public land areas, but also zoning changes or amendments that we're going to get to towards the end of the presentation. And what are we trying to encourage as part of this private property redevelopment? One, by preparation of this master plan, it gives a visual clue to property owners or investors of what the town is looking for, but also these visuals help inform us all about what we'd want to consider when it comes to zoning changes to encourage this type of development. And we want to encourage development that places new buildings along the right of way, or as I mentioned earlier, along the back of the sidewalk that you will be installing, to create more of a traditional townscape, places for people to walk along the sidewalk and interact with storefronts along that sidewalk area there. That's what we're headed towards here. We also want to modify zoning to allow for market rate residential here, such as townhouses and apartments above shops. Have more people living here, that one, there is a market for that, for more residential in the community. It also has more people living here, which is better for the retail establishments here. They have more people living close by to buy their goods. And it also helps with property values because you have residential above retail, therefore more value in the property itself as opposed to just one floor of retail, which is happening in most of the parcels here now. We're going to look at zoning that pulls the parking to the back of the buildings, maybe to the side of buildings in some areas, as opposed to having this big sea of parking with the buildings set way to the back now. We want the buildings up front with the parking behind, but still have easy access to those buildings from those parking lots. Through zoning, we can also look to minimize curb cuts and improve pedestrian connections, and also take into consideration design guidelines, which I know is something you've talked about and we would certainly want to strongly recommend, so that as new building occurs, it's done using architectural styles and creating what we call a sense of place, that this is part of Old Lyme. It has a certain character to it that we know is similar throughout the community. Doesn't mean everything has to look the same, but it certainly needs to have a character that's in keeping with the character of Old Lyme. So now we're going to zoom in on some of the corridor here to show how this might happen in certain parcels. So this area here, again, the Lieutenant River to the right, Huntley Road to the left, and this area here we think might attract more immediate investor interest in redevelopment. It's kind of a prime location. Post office is here. It has a lot of amenities, especially if when the town invests in new public green space here, etc. So on the upper side or the north side of Halls Road, we're showing in the darker brown some new buildings, again, brought up to the back of sidewalk. These buildings have dimensions to them that could easily support a retail on the first floor, residential above, or if you step back one step behind the buildings at front on the street, those buildings are deep enough to be potentially townhouse type structures, so they'd be residential back there. We've screened some back, and they're visual to indicate that this is going to be a phased improvement over time. This all isn't going to happen at once. And when it happens and where it happens, we can't control that because it's private property and private investment. What we can do through our zoning is control how they do it at the time it comes when they want to invest in this. On the upper right of this, you're seeing a larger building. As we're stepping back from the roadway, when we look at zoning dimensional requirements, we might want to consider allowing taller buildings as we step back from the roadway. And this building that is, again, stepped back on the upper right, you can see it has a larger footprint. It could be a taller building, retail on the first floor, residential above, and with a nice, looking over the wetlands there over to the Lieutenant River, it could be a fantastic place for residential use. Maybe like a 55 and older type of community there. Maybe that's something that would want to be considered. Because in addition to encouraging more residential here, there certainly seems to be a market for people in town who are turning older, who might want to move into a location like this, be in a facility where they have certain amenities there within the facility itself, but within an easy walk, they can get to a grocery store or other retail that would be in the area also. The other building we're showing here, and I don't know if you can see my cursor when I move it. Okay.
Yep.
This little building here, and I say little because compared to the larger one I was just talking about, certainly a prime location. And I talked earlier, maybe there wants to be a municipal presence along Halls Road in addition to the sidewalks and green space. This might be a great location for a municipal building, fronting on a municipal green. Maybe it's a new location for a senior center, especially if the building behind it is catering more towards senior living. A senior center here, again, drawing people into the area that could visit the senior center, and walk to some of the amenities that are in the area while they're here. I know you have a senior center in another location, but it's that type of use, some sort of maybe community space or something like that. It doesn't have to be. It could be a private property, but if you're looking for a municipal presence, we thought this might be a good location for that because of the public open space that's in close proximity to that particular location. Moving to Halls itself, you can see how we are now starting to show on-street parking. So in the prior improvements, the sidewalks would have gone in a location that now on-street parking can come in along Halls Road as development occurs along Halls Road. So anybody who's coming along and lucky enough to find an open parking spot could park and jump into the retail next to them. But if there isn't, it's fairly easy to get in behind these structures and park and walk to these retail establishments from the backside also. Moving down to the plaza side or the lower side of Halls Road, what we're starting to show here also are buildings up against the back of the sidewalk or up against the public right-of-way with reorganized parking behind them. And this is an example of how improvements could be stepped by a property owner. So what we're showing here, and hopefully you can see it in the dashed red line, is where the current buildings are on the plaza. And as a property owner starts building new buildings along the street, these current buildings could remain. And when a new building is finished, the liquor store could move into the new building, and then a building back here could be demolished. I laid out this concept of what would be ideal once everything was redeveloped, and there might be a need to retweak this so that the roadway and the parking could go in the short term, knowing that in the long term the buildings are going to come out. But that's the intent, is that not everything needs to happen at once. A couple buildings could go in, and then a couple buildings taken offline. A couple more buildings could go in, and then the remainder of the buildings to the back of the parcel could be taken offline. And when it's all done, it all ties together. Now, this is Jeff's and Edie's, I would say. I'm going to drag you into this, Edie, if I'm going to get in trouble for this. But this is a vision. This is what we came up with. A developer is going to come up with their own idea for this area, and it probably isn't going to match this exactly. But what's important for us to think about are the concepts we're looking at here, so that when we talk about zoning, we put in place zoning regulations and setbacks and certain requirements that people would follow so that they would get to something close to this, though it's not going to match exactly.
Also, the idea of the bypass road was not feasible because of DOT. There'd still be a truck access route behind the existing.
Go back here. Yeah, right. At one point, there was talk about a bypass road coming behind, around the back of the parcel, behind the grocery store. We've looked into that because of Condot property, DLT property back here, as well as wetlands back here. That bypass road really is not feasible. This is just intended to show truck access for the grocery store. That is part of this initial investment. The grocery store may stay exactly where it is.
But it might expand to be entering from a new.
Right, it should be this diagram here. So again, moving further west, allow the same concepts in this western end of the Halls Road area. New buildings up along the sidewalks along Halls Road, on-street parking where we can fit it in. You can see now we're getting into areas where we can't fit on-street parking everywhere. So we've got more parking beside and behind buildings in those areas. And then again, as these new buildings are phased in, current buildings could be phased out. And what we're showing here is, I think, as the new buildings come in, the buildings with the dash red would phase out. And in this situation here, the grocery store, which is there now, we're showing a grocery store remaining there, but instead of entering from this side, basically the Halls Road side, there would be a new entrance as they remodel the grocery store. So you'd enter from this right side here, where that would have its own field of parking. If I go back, it's got its own field of parking here for the grocery store, and people would come in and out that way. This parking would all be shared by everybody, but grocery stores like to know they've got a good amount of parking out front, and that's what this would do for them, with a new entry to the grocery store here, still truck access back behind it for deliveries, etc. And then on the north side, again, the right-of-way gets a little narrower in some areas, plus just the way the parcels are configured and how they're used, on-street parking may not be as needed or desirable on that side, and that's why we're not showing on-street parking, but showing parking beside and behind the building. Again, to show you an example of what could happen. There could be on-street parking here, depending upon how a developer develops, but again, we need to have zoning that allows some flexibility so we can work with a couple types of different approaches here. Then as we get to the far left side here, we're showing a redevelopment option for this corner here. Again, the red dash line here is that current blue building. It could be a new building, again, that engages the sidewalk here, kind of anchors that corner. There is that smaller residential looking Cape style building here with some outhouses. I'm sorry, we forgot to dash those in red, but those are here where some new green space might occur, which we expect there would be some private green space as well as public green space along the corridor, because with new residential coming in, some of those entities that are putting that residential in might want to have green amenity space for their parcels. I'm going to flip back a minute because there was one thing I forgot to mention, and that is, again, when it comes to parking, this is that area of the plaza closest to the post office, and there's a grade change from Halls Road down to the parking lot. And what we're showing is the potential for parking beneath the building, which a lot of developers are doing now, of lower level parking in the retail and residential above. We'll show you on a cross section later on how that would work. But again, acknowledging the fact that a developer may want to do that and take advantage of that grade change and have parking under the building. So instead of a row of building with garage doors coming in, which is not pedestrian friendly, this is an option where parking could still be under or within the building footprint, but there's only one point of access for in and out. And in fact, you know, if someone was to develop these at one time, all these buildings could interconnect at the lower level with pedestrian plazas above, just a drive that connects each building with its own pot of parking underneath each. Again, I'm getting into a lot of detail here, trying to stay big picture, but we couldn't help ourselves. What I'm going to do now is turn it over to Kurt, and he's going to talk about this end of the property and how this internal circulation drive works with the I do projects in both states, ConDOT parking lot here, and how there's a potential here of really making this a multimodal little hub for the area. So Kurt, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So we have the existing commuter lot accessed from the intersection of 156 at the entrance to the Baldwin Bridge, I-95. We know that commuter parking is extremely important to both DOT and the public at large. So we thought about ways that we could actually enhance that commuter parking and weave it into the project. And I want to stress, this is simply a concept at this stage. We wanted to pull something together that at some point, once this was approved by the committee in concept, that we could actually approach DOT and get some initial reactions. So recognizing that bus transportation is a key part of a commuter strategy, we thought, well, how can we enhance this lot and connect it with some of the other lots, which in turn would connect it with some of the proposed developments? So we've added a loop road that you can see there in black to allow one of the large commuter buses, coach buses, to traverse the lot, and we've proposed a bus stop, bus shelter. This could also be used by Town Transit, who runs locally. And we were even thinking in that case, for example, somebody could park their car, or if they lived close by to this area, literally walk here, take a Town Transit bus over to Old Saybrook and get on the train. So we're trying to think of sequential connections by creating a bit of a transit node here. We've actually given some of these developments a bit of a TOD, or transit-oriented development flavor, which is very popular. You may hear the term multimodal used in these types of discussions, and that really means designing spaces that accommodate a variety of transportation modes: vehicle, bicycle, pedestrian, in this case, creating the link to rail. So again, just an idea. We also felt that it could be an enhancement to the lot because we're actually, as you can see, adding some additional parking with some crosswalks to create connections for pedestrians. Again, just a concept. We felt that this was a good way to work with the DOT, potentially enhance some of their facilities, while at the same time creating some spaces that really serve both the commuters and the people that may actually live in some of these residential developments.
There's one point I want to make, Kurt, here that I forgot to make on my other slides. I told you, Edie, I'm going to forget something at some point. And that was this internal drive here. So we're showing a connection out to 156 coming into the commuter lot, but also this internal drive that would go through the plaza that would feed into the new parking areas. And it just so happens that this could align and not touch the footprint of the current grocery store. And that as this area got redeveloped, again, we talked about the entrance to the grocery store would flip to the right side. But in the meantime, that drive that's in front of the grocery store now could align with all these other improvements to the left or right. So depending upon which comes first, it all ties together in the long run. Right, Kurt, I'm going to flip ahead for you. I think this is just a quick orientation. Then we have the detail ones. You tell me what you want to do, Kurt.
Yeah, just a quick overview. So this is looking at the public infrastructure, as Jeff mentioned earlier. The public space, public infrastructure, the public right-of-way is something clearly where the town, of course, working with DOT, it is a state road, has the ability to make changes that set the stage, coupled with the appropriate zoning for developers to come in and build out the project. So we looked at various elements of the roadway, and what we're showing here is at the top is your existing cross section. It's very vehicle oriented, very vehicle centric. We talk about multimodal. It's pretty much single modal, automobile. Very common. It served its purpose, and now we're looking to enhance it. So in general terms, when we look at a street cross section, we are thinking in terms of what we call complete streets. And what that essentially means, there's really no singular design prescription for complete streets. It's really unique to the context in which it's built. But it does typically have common elements. Yes, vehicles, but it also includes vehicle traffic calming measures to slow vehicles down. It typically includes sidewalks. That gets into that, again, multimodal theme. Bike lanes or some sort of bicycle accommodations. And then other things, medians or islands, and even aesthetics are important. We want to create a sense of place. So when we talk about a complete street, that's kind of what it means, is combining all these things. So all the factors are accommodated and thought about, and we're really balancing the movement of vehicles, bicycles, people with safety, efficiency, and aesthetics. as an example, a complete streets project in a rural area may look very different from a complete streets project in an urban area, but they're still complete streets. So that's just a little bit of a background. So this is just an example using some cross sections through Halls Road that Jeff talked about. As you can see, we've got the sidewalks laid in at the outer edges with some street lighting, green spaces to buffer pedestrians from the roadway. We've got bicycle accommodations, which could include either what we call shoulder or even share the road. Ideally, there are bike lanes, dedicated bike lanes. But once we get into further steps, that will be fleshed out. We have our vehicle travel lanes, and in this cross section, we've also added some vehicle turn lanes, and that's to prevent cars from trying to bypass someone as they're making a turn, because when they do that, they encroach on the bike lanes. So these are concepts, and I want to point out, as Jeff mentioned, that elevation change. You can see on the right-hand side of the slide, a vehicle, a little bit of sense of scale there, adapting to those elevation changes, but that gives you a sense of the difference between that lower level, the parking area, and where the roadway itself is. So we had talked about potentially building things in phases. So this is what we would consider a full build out. You can see on the roadway, again, at the periphery, we have the sidewalks with lighting. In this cross section, we've added on-street parking, as Jeff mentioned earlier. Very important component to allow some on-street parking, and also thinking about the accommodations for those vehicles. We want to make sure that dimensionally we have enough room, so somebody opens a door, a bicyclist riding by still has enough passage where he can safely move. You can also see a little bit of the buffering between those bike lanes and the roadway. We want the bicycles to feel safe in their envelope as they're moving with the traffic. And then, of course, the travel lanes again, and the center lane designated as a turn lane, multi-directional, depending on where it is. This one's a little bit more enhanced. On the right-hand side, you can see a building, give a little bit of sense of scale of how that would play in with the storefront or the street scale in front of the building, and then that topographic difference as you move down. So the front of the building, bit of a smaller scale visually. The rear of the building, because of the topography, could be, you know, an extra story or such exposed in the back. Funding opportunities, of course, critically important to building some of these things out. And again, this is specific to those items in the public right-of-way that we want to build. And essentially in the state of Connecticut, there's 4 major funding categories for these types of improvements. The lot zip program is probably the most prevalent one for the type of things we're talking about, that is administered through the Connecticut Department of Transportation. And then that's done in concert with the local planning organization, in your case, Lower Connecticut River Valley COG. 2 different ranges depending on what work is being proposed, up to $500,000 for pure sidewalk projects. And then based on the funding that we've been seeing, up to approximately $2 million. And the reason I say approximately is the lot zip program is actually a variable funding program based on the allocation given by DOT to the local council of government. So it varies. It's not a hard and fast number. In speaking with the River COG, the programs, projects that they've got in their pipeline are averaging about $2 million, which is actually a good number for the things that we're talking about. So that's the lot zip program. The Community Connectivity Grant Program, something that the town is benefiting from right now with the Soundview Gateway project, up to $600,000, primarily intended for bicycles, pedestrian, and those kinds of things. So absolutely applicable to the types of things we're talking about. And I do want to stress, with these multiple funding sources, there could be a combination of funding that achieves the results that you want. You're not necessarily committed or locked into a single funding source because these funding sources have variable timelines based on budget cycles and those kinds of things. It's quite conceivable that you could utilize multiple funding sources to achieve your goals. The Community Connectivity Grant Program tends to be a bit smaller scale. It is capped out at the 600, but it's a good program, and the DOT has had pretty good success with that program. The third funding source is from the Federal Highway Administration. It is funneled through the Connecticut DOT, Transportation Alternatives. The first Soundview Hartford Avenue project used the precursor to this program. It was called MAP 21. That program doesn't exist anymore. That has been replaced with the Transportation Alternatives, or TA, set aside. As an example, BSC is working with the City of New London. We're under construction now on a project that they received TA money for that's being built. Again, pretty good budget availability on that project. And this really suits what we're talking about here on Halls Road. And last but not least, specific to the roadway, is the Small Town Economic Assistance Program, or STEEP as we call it. They tend to be much smaller. The average funding that was in the most recent round was about $120,000. In fact, Old Lyme did receive some funding for some sidewalks. But again, we could be looking at a combination of funding sources to achieve what we'd like to achieve. I did also want to mention there are some other funding programs out there. For example, DEEP, Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, has a trails program. Well, that could potentially be applicable to the bridge and the boardwalk pieces of the project that we're talking about. So one of the things that we'll look at for you as we're going through some of the zoning things is what might be the direct applicability of some of these programs, and we'll give you a summary as part of our final deliverable that may include even the funding cycles, the timelines, and those kinds of things. What projects are in the queue? When might funding become available for this project, so you can plan accordingly.
Thank you, Kurt. So again, just to refresh everybody's memory, what we're talking about here is on the left, we just took a snippet of this area. The post office is on the lower right here. Snippet to say, here's what you have now on the left. If the town makes an investment in the middle, here's what you'll have in this particular area: sidewalks, green space, bike trail, pedestrian improvements. And then over time, hopefully we see the private investment come in and build off of that public investment. So this is the sequencing we're anticipating will happen, but you never know. There might be some private investment interested early on. And that's why we need to start looking at zoning next. I'm sure you all know there's obviously been some interest in some development along Halls Road in the last couple of months. That interest has been gas stations and convenience stores. Obviously, we're talking about a different look here. So we need to, our next step is to work with you to look at zoning, the different components of the zoning bylaw, zoning ordinance, and what do we need to make changes to so that the master plan elements that we showed you today could actually be built, approved by the town and built by a private entity. So one is looking at the uses that are allowed within this zone to allow new and more diverse housing options, such as townhomes and apartments. We want to look at density, allow more square footage per parcel, which will incentivize investment. At the same time, we also think there's a demand there with the housing market that people investing in their property want to see the ability to place more housing on their parcels. Dimensional controls that don't push buildings away from the right of way, but bring buildings up towards the right of way. So they are along the road and along the back of sidewalk. Parking requirements, we think some of your parking requirements right now are rather extensive. And these days, a lot of communities are relaxing the parking ratios so that, for example, instead of 5 spaces for 1,000 square feet of commercial space, you only be required to have 3 spaces. That type of relaxing was what I need. And also including landscaping. And landscaping isn't just strictly trees and ground cover. It's also looking at stormwater management and collecting stormwater in landscaped areas to allow it to percolate or be what we call pre-treated before it may have to go into a stormwater system. Design guidelines, which would describe the character of the new buildings that would be placed here, give guidance to developers on that. Screening, so that those things we need, the service areas, the dumpster areas, the air conditioning units, those things, how do we screen those, minimize their visual impact? And that could be both things that happen on the ground level as well as things on the roof line. Sometimes we see big HVAC units on top of buildings, and they may be necessary to put them there, but we want to make sure they're screened both at the ground level and the upper level. And also looking at signage, which is another thing that zoning controls. And we want signage that works for the businesses, but we also want signage that works for the character and the consistent with the design guidelines for the community. Again, just a reminder, once all these things come together, a number of community benefits. We talked about this earlier, but the ability for incentivizing investment, more square footage per lot, allow for housing for younger and older residents, mix of uses on parcels, which is a more sustainable economic model over time to go through the ups and downs of economic cycles. Certainly improving safety, circulation safety for vehicles and pedestrians and bicycles. A phased approach here that shows how property owners can transition from current buildings to new buildings, move current tenants from existing buildings into new buildings, and also very importantly, new development that's consistent with the town character. Oops, we had next steps in here, Edie. I don't know what happened, but I'll turn it over to you since I'm on the spot here, and that slide got missed. But for next steps, we want to talk about, as Edie mentioned earlier, getting your comments on this, hopefully your feedback and approval moving forward. One of the critical next steps is to start talking about zoning, because you have had some developer interest and pressure, and we want to help you get to a better place in zoning sooner than later, so you have a better control over what's going to happen here. And also, as Kurt did the deep dive on the different funding sources, how can we help you start looking for funding to start investing in the public improvements you want to see within your right of way, the sidewalks, the crosswalks, those such things. I think those were the key next steps we want to certainly address.
And one other one was the public outreach with this master plan to set up some town hall open houses similar to what we had in 2019 to introduce your road plan and also present the master plan to specific groups to establish support for the plan. Okay.
So I'm going to stop sharing so we can see more of each other, but I can certainly share again if we want to go back and look at any of those images.
Okay, so we can open it up to questions.
Well, I think mine is not a question, it's more of a comment. Zoning is very important, right? Have
Yes.
you guys read the zoning regs or no?
Yes.
There are only, I think, 5 identified uses that require a special permit.
Right.
Anyone on the phone know that or no?
Sorry, your voice is coming in and out. I can see the
I'm
lips
sorry.
moving, but I can't hear all the words.
Yeah. So one of the special the non-required special permits, just so the committee knows, can everyone hear me right now?
Yep.
Is adult entertainment, right? It's crazy. It is crazy. Jeff, when did you start your project?
Kurt, when did we start this? Beginning of the year?
Yeah.
A little earlier than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
January 1st, you started?
I think they started in November, end of November.
Right now, gas stations are allowed, right? And I agree with everything that was presented, and I love the sidewalks, and I love all that stuff, and I love getting funding for everything, but we got to make progress. So the next steps were empty. They were empty, right? We've been working on this for a long time. If we want to do something, we need to do it sooner rather than later. So I, to the committee, would recommend that we get a timeline from somebody about what happens next.
Yep.
We have never had a timeline.
We
And
have
we're
had a
gonna hold,
timeline,
we're
actually.
gonna hold the
There has
guys that
been a
we're paying,
timeline. And
we're
we're a month
gonna
late.
hold the guys that we're paying money to that timeline. The first thing that I would have done if I reviewed the zoning regs and I saw that adult entertainment only required a siting plan, I would have said, hey guys, here's my priority. It's not like, what kind of drainage we need or sewage for, for affordable housing or whatever the hell it is. We need mixed use. We need less setbacks. It's pretty simple what we need, but we need it a lot faster is my point.
So Dave, can
Yeah.
I interrupt you a minute?
Yeah, of
we
course.
are
Yeah.
at a point now where we do have a set of drawings. We do have a existing conditions report. And the very next step, which these guys have been talking about all along, is to get going right away on the zoning and funding needs of this project. There's no way to do this the other way around, and we are where we are today. So I'd like to field comments based on what we have today and whether we can get this recommended to the Board of Selectmen to get this project finished up. Because as you say, we don't want to waste any more time, and I certainly don't want to. And I'd like to see, I think we do need a timeline. We did get a timeline in the original proposal. We are a month off of it, which is not a long space of time, honestly. And I would like Kurt and Jeff to let us know when we think this zoning package of language will be ready for us. It is clearly the most pressing thing we need for this master plan.
No adult entertainment, please.
Right.
So we had talked to Edie about this, and we were what we talked about was coming back at the next meeting with a more detailed outline of going through the zoning ordinance and talking about this needs to change, this needs to change, this needs to be this should be that, to get people to approve it. I'm sorry, I don't know why you're shaking your head, because then we can write the language that would have to be approved through
Because I'll
official
send
process.
it to you in the next 3 days, Jeff. I'll send it to you in the next 3 days what I think needs to be changed.
That would be great. And if the committee wants to meet next week, we can meet next week.
Okay, well, that's my point. We are lurching from gas station to gas station right now.
I had a question.
So Edie, I think the first thing is a timeline that everyone agrees with. That is a tight timeline, not a month of Sundays, right? Because we can't lurch from a gas station to gas station here. That's where we are.
Okay, I got your point. So, if you want, I mean, I do believe, Jeff, that starting working on, if we can say what we've seen tonight is what we want to recommend as a committee to the Board of Selectmen, we can dive right into the zoning language getting built based on what we've approved tonight. So, you know, I think that's the way we need to go. I know you have a plan of what you think is needed, but this is a town committee and we have to deal with everyone in the town in order to get things done. And I know that we make our recommendations, and I think it's really key that we get the zoning going immediately. So I'm on the same page with you, Dave. Any other
Edie,
questions from the
can
rest of
I
the group?
ask a question?
Thank you,
Yep.
Edie. Yeah.
Edie, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
I just want a little clarification on exactly what is doable at this point. I know you all want to get to zoning and all, but just on the master plan progression slide, and where they showed the three images, the three aerial images, the public right-of-way improvement, that's the town-owned property. So is that the one that we're really focusing on, the east end only? Because, you know, going through to the private redevelopment, I feel like that is way too much. There's no time. That's why we're getting bogged down with this. I think the goals need to be refined and more doable right now. Are you going to say we're focusing on sidewalks and the green space and the
And
signage?
signage.
Because I feel like if you start trotting out to another master plan, to another specific group, and it's going to look just like the Yale study, and it's not going to work. I think
Okay,
things need to
so
be
what is your point?
realistic
Do
now.
you want to know what we're doing first? Is that your question?
Well, right, because I did a screenshot of the master plan progression, and is the middle image where it is showing public right-of-way improvement that
Yep.
I believe the engineer said that is the town owned. Is that, and that's the east end of the Halls Road, is that going to be the focus? Because don't be focusing on demolishing buildings and all that stuff,
We're
because
not focusing on any private property. The only thing the town can actually do is the first phase of work, which is all the right of way, sidewalks, etc. The
Okay,
rest is what's
okay.
informing zoning. So if you don't have the rest and understand what the future could be, we can't write the zoning to make a village district. That's why that's there. It's not saying we're going to do this, because the town has no jurisdiction over private property. It's pretty clear. So yes, the first and only thing the town can do is get the funds together and the engineering drawings together to do the sidewalk project on the right of way.
Okay, and also, how about, and I'll just jump ahead on this, as far as wetlands with the property behind Hideaway area, because I know that they're showing, you know, all kinds of, you know, visionary things back there, but that's all wetlands, is it not? Are we going to be like
They're
Old Saybrook and
following,
start filling in
they're
wetlands?
following there's a 100-year wetlands floodplain, and they are following within that. They're not going into wetlands. They're actually following exactly where the current footprint is. So
Okay, I just feel like that could be a big waste of time, because in Old Saybrook, everywhere you see, there's property for sale, it's commercial, and it's all wetlands. My other, one last question, have the engineers consulted DOT with their input, or is that not pertinent right now?
Kurt, do you want to answer
Yeah,
that?
yeah, we've had numerous discussions with DOT. One critical goal, as I mentioned, of tonight's meeting is if we do receive approval in principle of this master plan, we will then put this in front of DOT to get their feedback. But we have had numerous conversations at various stages as we've pulled this together. It's been piecemeal because it's been very specific with respect to the questions we've asked. This master plan will be a wonderful tool then to bring before them to start getting very specific feedback on potential improvements. Very
And-
important part of the process.
And Kurt, what is the speed limit on that road, on Halls Road right now?
It varies. I was actually just looking at that. I think down near the intersection of I-95, it's as low as 30 miles an hour. I believe it's 30 miles an hour the whole way.
Okay.
And as we know, people do
People drive
not go
55.
30 miles an hour. And that's why it is very important as part of the work within the public realm to have traffic calming as a component of that complete streets principle. We want to slow vehicles down.
And is DOT, do they like that idea of slowing people down? Because, you know, we're really a cut through for 95. And one other question I'll ask, has there been a recent traffic count done on Halls Road? Is that relevant?
We have all of the Connecticut DOT data that they use, but at this point, there has been no, in other words, the town has not done traffic
No, of
counts.
course, but I just
But
say in your DOT, have they done a
Yes.
recent
Yes,
count?
they have. And they actually, it's actually online. So you can actually see those traffic counts and they
Okay,
actually color code them. So yeah, that data, and I don't have it right in front of me, but I don't know the exact date, but it's not that old. So
Okay.
that information
That's okay.
is
All right.
available
Thank
online.
you.
You
Okay,
want to say something?
thank you.
Yeah, so I just have
Very well.
two items. One is, well, actually three. So first is, are there any islands? I didn't see any islands when you guys were presenting. There are natural islands that when you drive down Halls Road that lend themselves to islands. And I didn't see that in the plan that was presented. And I won't call it a master plan because I think the staging should be, first of all, signage. I'm looking at the same, and I said this 100 million times, so people are probably used to hearing it, the same 45-degree angle that I saw 22 years ago when I first came to Old Lyme. Right. So in terms of next steps and a schedule, I would hope that signage is such an easy thing that would be first and foremost. That would show people progress. The second
We
thing
are
is,
working on that, Dave. We have been in contact with the folks that run the Hideaway Plaza there.
no,
and I've actually
Edie,
provided
I'm
them with
talking about state signage. I'm
state
talking
signage.
about, yeah, I'm talking about directional signage. You know, East Lyme is 8 miles away or whatever it is. Here's the 45-degree angle thing for you to go to get safe from a hurricane, whatever. So there's a lot of extraneous signage. No parking signs all up and down Halls Road for a reason, because one year there were people parking there for the the fireworks show or whatever it is, right? It's a mess. And the state will put as many signs as they possibly can up, as we have seen in the off ramps, you know, all over state. And I've never seen it in any other state that I have business in. But at any rate, so signage is very important and very easy. So that's one thing. The second thing is the islands. Do you think that there is an opportunity for islands on Halls Road? And if you don't, that's fine. And then thirdly is, what are we voting on tonight? And I think what we should do is, if we're voting on the rough idea of sidewalks and crosswalks, as was one of the slides, then we should talk about those islands as well for pursuit, of funds.
So
If it can
islands were discussed, and in order to make turning lanes and stuff work more fluidly, islands become more of an issue. And they also, the wider you make the road, the harder it is for people to easily cross from side to side to go from one shop to another. So the islands add up to yet another impediment to making that happen. So that was discussed, and the concept was to do a 3-lane road with bike lanes. I mean, there's a lot of different things that need to be fit
bike
in with
lanes,
buffers.
All
What's
right, okay.
Bike
Okay.
lanes.
Can
Yeah.
I ask a question?
Yes, Howard.
I just want to clarify something for a minute. It has taken quite a long time, and it would be great if we could do some of those things very quickly. But there have been attempts to do that. I know when we were putting this project together and interviewing different consulting companies, all of them told us, don't do it piecemeal. You need a master plan. And in fact, the town did go out and try to do something very quick to put in maybe a stop sign or something like that. And the DOT wouldn't even talk to us because they wanted a comprehensive master plan. So that's where we are and why we haven't done it just very quickly to try to do one element versus another. So that's how we are at this point. And I do think, they've done a good job. And as they mentioned, we're not tearing down buildings. We're not insisting that buildings go in certain locations. What we are responsible is for the road, as they indicated in phase 1. And that's what we're trying to get done.
So, question, did the DOT rule out islands? Guys?
It was a design decision.
So it
Based
wasn't
on
the DOT
multiple-
that said no islands?
No, it wasn't.
Okay,
I mean, these guys are engineers. They helped us figure out the best ways to get this road to work. If you have an engineer that wants to tell us a better way to do it, we can back up and go back that way again.
well, engineering and design are two different things. And I think that
Engineering
the
is
islands,
design. Engineering requires design in order to make engineering work. So it is.
okay, all right.
I wasn't clear on what BSC's response was about islands. Was it you didn't consider them or you considered them and for some reason you ruled them out? Could you just please clarify just what the island situation is?
Jeff, do you want to?
I can
I'll let
rephrase kind of what Edie said. Islands were looked at right now. In one area, you do have painted islands, and they're open-ended with breakthroughs for vehicles to move through. Yes, islands can be a very aesthetically pleasing element to a roadway. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking about Columbus Boulevard near the convention center in Hartford, right? You've got the island in there with some fencing and plantings. But from Edie's, as Edie mentioned, they also do have a downside in that, number one, they do take up real estate in the roadway. So if you do put an island in, now you can't have those turn lanes we talked about because of the physical.
Wait, what turn lanes? What new turn lanes are we adding?
Not adding new ones. There's a 3-lane road there. So if you want to take a left turn, you move into the middle lane and then you can turn left without holding up the traffic behind on the right side.
Why don't, if you could just put islands in where they're already painted, what's wrong with that?
Because those are intended to accommodate vehicles. So if they're striped, we have more flexibility with where vehicles can locate themselves to make turning movements. Additionally, as Edie said, if you put it in an island, you tend to potentially widen the road, potentially impact the ability for people to walk across the road. Islands are not 100% out of the question. We have not specifically approached DOT about islands. I will tell you that they tend to not favor islands because they become a maintenance issue, a snow clearing issue, and a potential traffic impediment. But
so along US 1, as I go up and down the shoreline, there are no islands because the DOT doesn't like them. Is that right? Because I can tell you, I drove from Guilford all the way to Stonington on US 1. There's a lot of streetscapes that are wonderful that include islands. So I don't necessarily agree with you.
Yeah, again, we're happy to engage DOT. They have not seen these plans yet because we don't want to put them in front of them until they're approved by this committee in principle. But we're happy to have that discussion with them. Ultimately, it's DOT's road, and what DOT dictates is what will happen. It's their
That's right.
facility.
I agree. I agree.
But we're happy to have that discussion with them.
Let's leave it at that, that you will have a discussion with them about, you know, whether an island makes sense in this particular roadway area. I think everything is dependent on exactly where it's located within a township. So I think if the DOT suggests this is a good idea, we can revisit that. I'd like to kind of get going. It's 8:30 already, and I would like to know if anyone else has any other comments that they'd like to make. Otherwise, we can let these guys get on with their evening and finish up our meeting.
Can you take a comment from a non-committee member?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is Mary Jo Nozel, and I just want to thank everybody for the presentation. It was excellent, and you know, I'm kind of used to BSC groups graphics, and I wish you guys could see them in real time because I'm sure they would have been even more spectacular if we'd seen it in person. They do a really good job. I want to thank you for the transportation hub design. I hadn't heard anything about that. I found that really, really exciting and interesting on the west corner. So that was really, really exciting, and how you envision the multimodal transportation opportunities if we get that far. So I want to thank you for that idea. And that's it.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Jeff.
I completely support the idea that we need to move ahead quickly on zoning. So what we showed tonight was the potential of what could happen on private property to make sure everybody was comfortable with that, so we could address the zoning changes that would be necessary to come up with development that similar to what we showed on our plans. I want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that because that was the part of the intent of tonight's meeting. If people are comfortable with that, that gives us the ability to forge ahead and come back with recommended changes that will allow development consistent with what we showed.
Okay. And do you want to get back to us as soon as, you know, like tomorrow or something, give us an idea of when you think we can, if we can get this approved tonight, what kind of schedule can we nail you down to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If we're a month behind, we'll try to make it up.
Okay. So any other comments from folks? Okay, well, on that note, I'd like to thank the folks from BSC. They've done a comprehensive job for us and given us some very good stuff to work from. And if you would forward us on the drawings for that, we'll post it on the Halls Road website so folks can look at that. And we'll get back to you hopefully in the next day or so to give you the go-ahead to get the zoning going so
Great.
we can follow up on that.
Okay, thank you, Edie. Thanks,
Okay,
everybody.
thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Good job. Thank you.
Okay, so I think it being somewhat late, I think we can sort of dispense with the extra parts of this agenda unless someone has a burning desire to carry on. Oh, Deb, you're muted.
In order to expedite this, as we've been talking about, can we make a motion at this point just to adopt the master plan as they presented, knowing that we're going to have some fill-ins and some open items such as the islands, and proceed on that basis so that we can get that. You're trying to
So
expedite this.
do you want to make a motion that this
Yeah.
plan
will-
is approved for.
Right,
Board of
as
Selectmen.
presented with, you know, provided they're, you know, going to check on a few items that we've requested and we get a satisfactory answer on that, we can hopefully adopt it. But I would just say and the basic idea of the concept of the 3 stages that they presented and the basic ideas that they presented, I think we can go ahead and adopt that now. And I would propose that.
Can I get a second for that?
I'll second.
Okay, that was Bud?
Mike.
Mike, I'm sorry. All right. Do we want to have a vote on that?
No,
All
we
those-
want discussion, Edie.
We want a discussion. Okay, let's have a discussion.
And so I am not supporting the plan. I just saw it tonight, right? And I obviously have, I supported a lot of what was presented, but there are some issues with it, including islands. And I think that's a very important thing. So if Howard's, the way that Howard had articulated his motion, it was kind of vague about we're going to check on some stuff. So the bigger question that I have is, what are we voting on? We're voting on approving this, and then what?
I think what we want to do is approve that we use this presentation from tonight for the Board of Selectmen to use moving forward for master plan based on, you know, we are going to look into islands. We're going to look into, what was the other stuff? I mean, I think the angle here is to try and get this thing moved through so that we can get onto zoning. So if you think that there's some major stuff here that will really impede zoning, then we should not approve to recommend this to the Board of Selectmen. If you feel as though you want some detailed tweaks here, these are all, the master plan is there as a system to help envision how the zoning changes would be and use it as a tool to get funding. It's not in stone that there's not an island here and there's a stop sign over there. It's basically a concept plan, a master plan to help us build our zoning and get our funding. Does that help you understand it more?
No, but what are we actually voting on?
We're voting to approve the master plan presentation from tonight to recommend the Board of Selectmen use this.
Use it for what, though? Because that needs to be part of the motion in terms of the recommend.
Okay,
If
we
we're
want to
going to
use it.
approve like something that these guys have spent a
Dave,
lot of.
would you like to restate the motion? That's fine. And we could do it. I think what we're trying to get at is we want to approve all the basic concepts. We want to approve the zoning. We want to approve the idea that we're going to do sidewalks and lighting and the things they described. And it's going to be in the 3 stages that they mentioned, and that there are a couple of open items, as you mentioned, which I think is good as far as island, and maybe there's a couple of other things that we haven't. But I think the overall, there must be a way of phrasing it that we can get this going.
Are we ready to go
going.
that far on it though? Because I feel like it's tough to approve something when you have open items, because then you have to list out all the open items. But I feel like, at least what I was hearing is, we want to see with this plan what BSC would recommend for zoning changes. I thought I heard that from a couple of people in the group. And that's a more limited thing to approve. It's just, we're saying, I don't even know if you need to approve that, right? It's just like BSC, keep doing your work.
Yeah. And so my concern is we're approving a plan that we just saw as a committee tonight with no public input. And so I think what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is the idea is we approve this plan, and then the Board of Selectmen can use this plan to go try to find funding for some of the low-hanging fruit. Is that the idea?
So they can, they can find funding and get the zoning underway. And
Yeah.
it also, of course, has to be, presented to the town at large. This is not something we're going to decide as the end all be all, but these plans are based on the earlier vision proposal from 2019. So a lot of people in the town have seen the precursor to this set of plans. I don't know if you ever did, but they have been out there. We've actually sent them to everyone that's on this
Oh,
committee.
no, I've seen all the plans, Edie. I have.
Okay,
but-
so it's not like, oh, this is the first time we've ever heard of this stuff, so.
Yeah, but they're very significantly different from 2 years ago. And by the way, I'm supportive of what BCS
Yeah.
presented tonight generally, with the caveat that islands are a natural thing to occur. And so if one person said that, oh, islands shouldn't exist, that's a problem, because we're just looking at this tonight as a committee.
Mhm.
And we
Okay,
haven't had time to necessarily reflect on it. And then the question is, once we approve it, is it like set in stone and we
No.
can't change
we
it? or-
It's
don't,
not
first of all, we
that.
don't
It's
have
not-
any control over anything, but
I
we're
I
just
think what we're
a
trying to
advisor.
do, remember, you started off and Bud started off, and we've been working on this for years. So here we have an opportunity. I think we're trying to do is expedite it and get some of these things going. That's exactly what you asked to do.
Yeah, to expedite it with something that give me a day to reflect upon it. Don't show it to me and give me 15 minutes to approve it.
I agree. And Edie, are they
That's
done
fine.
with the presentation? Was tonight the final, like, that was it, presentation?
This was their presentation, and again, these are an overall view of something. They're not like engineered drawings that say, 500 feet of this, and then it's turning into this type of curb cut. And
Right.
then it's
No,
doing-
but I understand, but we will not see them again for a presentation. Is that right?
That's right.
And when was the first, because this was phase 2, or this was the second time that they presented? When was the first time that they presented?
It was back in January. They presented the existing conditions for phase 1 of their project.
Okay.
And phase 2 is this, which is the
Okay.
drawing set.
Right,
And the
because
next set will be
right, and
zoning.
I like some of the things that they said, but I feel like I really want, and I'm not ready to vote on passing this on to, and I know you're now suddenly everybody's in a rush to pass something on, but
I'm gonna move to table the motion.
yeah, I agree, because
there a
I
second?
would like input from other members, and I want to make sure specifically that there are those, the doable things are the things that we are focusing on, not moratorium, not, all of these other big picture things that seems to drag us on for 5 years.
Well, Howard's
Nobody mentioned
Howard's-
moratoriums or anything. I think you're just going beyond what we did. What we're trying to do is to get this process going. It isn't written in stone. There's nothing that they presented that we're not going to have an opportunity to look at multiple times as exactly how the plan will work out eventually. So it's not,
Well, then-
we're not voting on, let's do this tonight and tomorrow they're going to start building. We're very far from that. And the same people who keep telling us we need to expedite this project, here we have a chance to do it. If you want to do it, let's expedite it.
Howard, your motion was to approve this plan that I saw 20 minutes ago. I'm not doing it.
Okay, so let's get
If-
to a
let's-
point where we
even
can
if
make
we
some
I
agreement.
made a motion to table Howard's motion.
So could we come up with a slightly more productive motion, which might suggest how much time the folks that have just been introduced to this new master plan layout need in order to make a decision so that we can make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen? This is just, if you want to throw this all out and start from scratch again because you want some islands in there, I don't think that's really the issue, but what I'd like to know is how much time do you need to review these drawings?
Edie, what you just said was to approve a motion to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. Howard's motion was to approve the plan. What is the motion to recommend? What are you recommending to the Board of Selectmen? What are
Just
we
like
being asked as a
just like
committee?
you guys all decided to want to recommend that we use the BSC to work with, as opposed to the other architecture firms that we used, we made a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that they use the BSC. That was all we did. We didn't have any jurisdiction over deciding that other than recommending it. This is the same type of motion that we would recommend that this master plan be used by the Board of Selectmen to go to the next step, which is zoning and fundraising.
Well, but
So
I don't think we know, we don't know what the zoning recommendations are because they're going to get
no,
back.
we're not there yet. That's the next phase.
Yeah, I just don't feel like we have any need to approve anything today. We can show it to them and
That's true.
we can agree to just show it to them and say, this is what we got and these are our
Yeah.
questions and this is what we're working on with them.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's right, Michael. Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
that's fine too.
I thought I heard, I'm trying to get to a point where maybe there is something we can agree on. I thought I heard people say the general idea and concept of what they presented was something they accepted and that we need that, we're looking at that and we need zoning changes basically as they outlined. Do everyone agree to that or not? Or they need more time to do that?
Do we need zoning changes to do sidewalks, signage, crosswalks, the bridge project, perhaps, right?
Is it presented in the zoning changes that you disagree with?
What's that?
The presentation outlined their suggested zoning changes. Which specifically do you agree or disagree with?
Yeah,
No,
see,
I don't
Howard,
think it
and
did, Howard.
maybe I missed that, but that's why I'm
Well,
thinking
that's a problem.
we need to go back to, I need to go back.
I
to
think it was
that.
just
So let's do this. Let's give you guys a week, 4 days, 3 days, whatever it is, to
That's
review
fine.
the drawings that we will post, and I'll send them all to you directly on your emails, so you have a chance to review the drawings carefully. Does that sound better to you? And
Well,
then,
I think we're
and
talking,
then we can,
I think we're talking
At the
about,
same-
Edie, I still think we're talking about two different things though, and this is
Yeah,
what I was saying
yeah.
before. I think that we're not ready to, this is not our final plan, right? They presented it to us. We have some
Yeah.
questions. So I don't know that I don't know that we should be approving this to send to the Board of Selectmen as our recommendation. I think that we can say, if as a committee, we have to vote to say that we're going to share this informally with the Board of Selectmen, or I don't know if we want to go into it.
I mean, that's fine.
Talking about it, but that we can spend some time looking at it and studying it and coming up with a list of things that on reflection we want to learn more about. Right now Islands is on the list of things we want to learn more about. I'm sure as we all look at it, we'll have some other things, and but we certainly don't want to make the mistake of wording this like we have approved this plan. I don't think anybody
Right.
wants to. We have approved this plan.
okay, that's fair. I'm just trying to get to the next step, that's all. So,
I think that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and appreciate that, Edie. Yeah.
I mean, the idea is, as you say, David, this goes on, and we've been through these kind of processes, and then you step back and years go by. So we're trying to find a way. Are there some things that we heard today that we feel comfortable enough to agree on to go forward with? And I think there were some, not all of them. I think you brought up a really good point on the islands, and there might be a couple of others, but I think generally the 3 phases we agreed on. I don't know if anyone disagrees on any specific zoning issues. So it seems like there's probably a lot that we agree on already.
Well, but
So
I'd
it would
like
be
to see
nice
this
to find a
language.
way to expedite the process if we do. That's
This
right.
is
Okay,
a
let's-
preliminary,
Mike-
yeah, Howard, this
Michael,
is a
do you wanna make a-
preliminary plan though.
I
This was
understand.
presented
That's
tonight.
fine.
And so
Right.
to Michael's point, like, give us a little bit. And by the way, we can have special meetings. It's not a problem.
Right. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look,
So-
if you're not
so Mike-
comfortable, we need that, then let's do that. And that's a very good idea. Why don't we just
So Mike, Michael,
take a
why don't
week
you
and
make
then
a,
have a special meeting and go through it again? I'm fine with
Michael,
that.
can you make a motion just so we can move beyond this to the effect of what you just said?
What, you're talking about me?
Yeah,
Well, I was just going to suggest, and let me see if everyone agrees, that we have a week to look at it. People think if that's enough time, and that you schedule, Edie, a special meeting sometime in the vicinity of a week from now, that we can go back through this, and I think everyone else will feel more comfortable with that. If that's fine.
I
That's a-
think that's right, Howard. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will
That's
we
good.
be meeting in person next month?
Yeah,
yeah, I think we could do that. So possibly a special meeting. I probably have meetings on the 20th, so I couldn't do it on a Thursday, but I can send around.
approximately a week. Why don't you pick a
Okay.
good time?
A week
I think-
to 10 days. Yeah, throw out some dates. Yeah.
And I
Okay,
think we want someone from BSC there too, right?
okay, yeah,
Just to answer questions, because people are gonna have questions and we're not gonna be able to answer them, right?
And Edie, what may be very helpful is if we have their presentation with
Yeah.
their,
Yeah.
design.
Yeah.
And we can get them comments prior to that meeting. And
okay,
everybody copies everybody on the committee.
Yeah.
So that we
Good idea.
understand, what the issue. My only issue is, I loved it. Just add some islands, that's it. And I love the reduced setbacks, which is what I've always said. Like, that's an easy thing to do, and, so generally I was in favor of it with the exception of the islands. And so I don't think that we should no committee should ever be asked to approve something as large as this, without the ability for some feedback at a minimum of the committee.
okay. That
Okay,
sounds good.
yeah, I was just
Right.
getting, what it sounded
we
like
will-
people were pretty much in favor of most of the things, so I was trying to find a way that we can at least get through those and put them aside and then deal with the open issues, but this is fine, let's just do it.
Okay,
You
so
will set a
let's-
meeting
I
within,
will send some.
About a
And
some
week
then
or
Howard,
so.
and then Howard, it's all done. Once we get it
I got you.
final, it's all
That's
done.
fine.
Yeah.
that's fine,
Okay.
no problem.
So I will send out some dates for everyone to see. I'm assuming people prefer evenings because they're working and stuff, right? And yeah, and I think that sounds like we've got a plan now, and we'll move on from there. So
In violent agreement.
okay. That sounds good. Now, do we want to proceed with any of the other parts of this agenda, or do we want to just finish up for the evening?
I forget what's on there, Edie, or anything that stands out that we
The other
need to
thing
discuss.
was talking about gas stations, which we could spend a whole nother evening doing that. And then just the work party and bench dedication report, which I don't think is even of relevance at this point. So,
Okay.
Edie, we may be down to just one gas station we have to deal with.
yeah, right. Okay, so why don't we leave this for now? I'll get the presentation and send it around to everybody.
Edie,
And you
one
guys-
comment, did everybody read the article on Connecticut Examiner regarding the Hall family property on Halls Road?
96.
The farm market or the farm market going for zoning?
Yeah, I think most people did. Is that,
Okay,
yeah, I mean, I think that's, hopefully that can work out, We'll
I think that would
see
be
how they're-
a great addition.
Yep. Yeah, so, and any other things folks want to talk about, or?
Oh, Edie, one thing is, I contacted Kids Education outside of Andy's Deli, the rusted
Right.
bucket that you can dump, nasty clothes into if you
Yes,
want.
yeah,
And so I'm waiting for a reply, but I sent them pictures and told them that they are on indiscriminately owned land. It's bizarre, because
yeah.
I don't know that they're on town land, but they certainly just
It is
plopped them
town
down
land.
there. And
Yeah.
so I will report back at our special meeting, and hopefully we'll get some satisfaction there, get that
Okay.
moved or removed.
When I
Okay.
heard him, when they talked today about screening, that's where I pictured that right away. At least if they could throw some
Yeah.
screening around that thing.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
just get rid of it.
Or
Yeah.
paint it, so it's not all rusted looking.
I don't know if
Yeah,
people
and we
know that.
also,
A lot
I-
of those are actually private industry and they're
Yeah.
not really charities. And people put their
Right.
clothes in there thinking they're giving it to a charity, and those people are selling that clothes. So I don't know what that one is. I never looked at it, but it would be nice at least to get a screening minimum and rid of it permanently.
yep. And also I did send a quoted proposal to the Selena, who's the contact we have that runs the Old Lyme Shopping Center where the Hideaway is. I've contacted her and gotten back to her a second time and have not gotten any response. She liked the design, she liked the ideas, but I think she has some other fish frying or something because she hasn't gotten back to us. But I gave her a full priced proposal for it and no answer. So we'll hear maybe someday about that. I don't know. So
Your design was
Yeah.
beautiful, by the way, so I hope that they take it.
yeah, they were ready to use it, but I don't know what happened. But
Adult entertainment.
Okay, so do we have a motion to adjourn?
We'll make it.
Second.
We want to debate it.
No, it's
Okay.
not discussable. Yeah. You
All
have to
right.
go to vote.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I,
Right.
Hi and goodbye.
All right, very good. Thank you all, and we'll talk to you later.
Sounds good.
Thanks, bye-bye.